Number 10. Radioactive fish? Now, most of you will have seen the three-eyed fish from The Simpsons that lives in the pond near the reactor in Springfield. But what if I told you there were some real creepy creatures growing near a real nuclear site? The Chernobyl nuclear meltdown is the biggest disaster of its kind that has ever occurred, and the site and surrounding area still remains uninhabitable to this day, unless you're not a human, that is. In the cooling pond for the now destroyed reactor, some monsters lie in wait. Massive catfish, thought to be the result of radiation mutation. I mean, look at that thing. The largest found at the site was measured to be 1.65 meters in length, and that's the size of a person. I would assume that that was a mutant too, especially given how close it is to the defunct reactor. But scientists have discovered that the absolutely gargantuan fish have not been affected by radiation, but by the rest of the cooling pond's ecosystem. Since there are no predators for the catfish that still live in the pond, they have an isolated food chain that they can be the king of, feeding on smaller fish, worms, and even amphibians, allowing them to grow to this massive size. Scientists are still doing more research in the area to see how other wildlife has been affected by the radiation. Number 9. Bobbing for brains. In 2017, British Columbia's Stanley Park hosted what they called a BioBlitz, a 24-hour event where scientists and adventurers of all ages would come together to try to catalog as many species in the area as they could. One of the so-called blitzers saw something strange in the water, a pulsating, slimy blob, and when they went in for a closer look, it seemed that they'd stumbled across a human brain floating there in the pond. Upon further inspection, however, it was revealed that it was in fact a rare colony of microorganisms that had grouped together, known as a bryozoan. These organisms, which feed on algae and plankton, group together in large blobs, so they can stand a better chance against the harsh world of an aquatic ecosystem. But they were thought to not exist in freshwater west of the Mississippi River, which was both exciting and concerning to scientists. Since they can only survive in waters that are warmer than 60 degrees Fahrenheit or 15.5 degrees Celsius, scientists think that this can be another warning sign of global warming, showing rising water temperatures around the world and the effect that it has on the ecosystem. Number 8. Coffin on the course. In 2019, maintenance workers at the Tetney Golf Club in Grimsby, England, were tending to a water hazard, and they stumbled upon something amazing under a mound of gravel at the bottom of the pond, a large wooden coffin. When archaeologists arrived to investigate, they realized the significance this find could hold. So, to keep the wood from disintegrating when it was removed from the water, they put it in a bag while it was underwater so that it could be removed from the pond while staying submerged. After sitting in cold storage for a year to strengthen it for examination, scientists began their work and opened the coffin. Inside, they found no identifiable remains, as DNA testing has proved unfruitful. Likely they rotted away under the water, but they did find something else. An axe, which appears to be from the Bronze Ages, around 40,000 years ago. Woolly mammoths still roamed the earth at that time. The coffin was made from a single oak tree and was lined with plants for cushioning, which helped date the objects. It also shows that whoever was buried in it was of some great esteem. For number 7, we take an even darker turn. In 2017, Oklahoma resident Brandon Duran had his life taken by his ex-wife and her new boyfriend, but his body was not discovered for quite some time. That is, until a witness who actually helped dispose of the deceased came forward and told the police where he could be found. Police sent divers to the bottom of a local pond, and what they found was truly shocking. Multiple buckets were retrieved from the bottom of the pond, and forensic research showed that after he had died, perpetrators decided to dispose of him in the grisly manner of dismembering, then placing body parts in different buckets, filling them with concrete, and throwing them into the pond. The people who committed this gruesome crime were arrested and brought to justice, and a documentary was even made about the case. Number 6. Boiling point. Now, we've all heard of hot springs, but this next entry really takes the cake. This interesting body of water is located on the beautiful island of Dominica and has some very strange properties. It was first reported in 1870, but it wasn't until 1875 that it was fully investigated by scientists. The 250-foot wide lake was giving off steam and even bubbling, and the temperatures measured were around 92 degrees Celsius at the water's edge, near boiling. And the water was too hot to measure in the center, but since the water water is actively bubbling, it must be over 100 degrees Celsius or 212 Fahrenheit. The water is likely heated by an underwater volcano, which causes gas heated by magma to increase the temperature of the water to its boiling point. Scientists have seen periodic large fluctuations in both the temperature and the water level, which they attribute to eruptions nearby. In 1880, the lake disappeared almost completely and became a fountain of hot water and steam, or a geyser, refilling over the next few years. In 2004, the levels lowered by 33 feet, but in 2005 refilled completely in one day. This showed scientists just how fragile the local geological systems are. Even though it seems like the next level of a hot spring, do not go swimming here. Number 5. Frozen flames. Speaking of hot water, this next entry on the list has shocked scientists around the world because even though this pond in Alaska is frozen over, the water can actually be lit on fire. These special bodies of water are called thermokarsts, and when frozen over, flammable gas coming from the bottom is trapped and then released when a hole is stabbed in the surface, allowing for the impressive display of fire and ice when lit. But it wouldn't be on this list if there wasn't something more sinister behind it. The reason this phenomenon is occurring is what's frightening, because the gas being released is methane gas, which is not only very flammable, but a potent greenhouse gas. So why are more and more of these methane lakes being found? Well, most of this gas was actually frozen and trapped in soil and ice during the Ice Age, and now rising global temperatures as a result of climate change are melting these methane beds, creating huge pockets of greenhouse gases just waiting to be released into the atmosphere. So while this is a cool party trick, the fact that it can happen at all proves that we need to find a way to combat both the cause and the effects. Number 4. Cannibal frogs. The name Goliath frog is crazy enough on its own, but there's more to these amazing African amphibians than their size. While the frogs themselves can weigh as much as a whopping 3.3 kilograms or 7.2 pounds, they're strong enough to move stones up to 2/3 of their own size. They move these rocks to create nests for their young to be protected from predators and the environment. The stones and other objects used create their own pond, and the frog then lays their eggs inside. And as the tadpoles hatch and grow, they leave the nest on their own once they're big enough to scale the walls. Unfortunately, most of these tadpoles will never make it out alive. Many species of frogs, including the Goliath frog, eat not only insects and other arthropods, but they also eat their own tadpoles and even other frogs. So not only are these guys massive, but they're cannibals too. Giant cannibal frogs. Now, that sounds like a movie on par with Sharknado. Number 3. Ancient tools and bones. In 2018, archaeologists were working in the Nufud Desert in Saudi Arabia and came across something they were not expecting. I know, a desert is not a pond, but this desert was once the bed of a pond or swampy area, shown by fossilized bones that have been found of small water birds, grazing animals, and even predators that frequented watering holes like jaguars. But along with the bones, the scientists also uncovered stone tools made by humans between 300,000 and 500,000 years ago, proving that earlier fossils they had found with chips and cuts were caused by humans. The tools were most likely made and used by early hominins like Homo erectus and predate any other artifacts found in the Arabian Peninsula by more than 100,000 years. Things like this showing just how long humans have been around and how far we've come always blows my mind. Number 2. Haunted by horses. In Milton, Ontario, there's a disturbing legend that dates all the way back to 1885 at Crawford Lake, one of the many bodies of fresh water in Ontario. The story goes that a father and son were carting lumber across the frozen lake in the winter, for construction or for warmth, nobody knows, but their horse-drawn cart was too heavy when weighed down with the cargo and crashed through the ice. The father and son floated to the surface and escaped with their lives, but the horses attached to the cart were sadly dragged to the bottom, where they sit perfectly preserved. At night, from the water's edge, they can be seen staring out from the depths with ghostly red eyes, longing to escape their watery grave. No one has officially investigated this, so for now, the mystery remains unsolved. Number 1. Death Pond. If you're not already afraid of the ocean, this should do the trick. 1.5 miles under the surface of the Indian Ocean lies a so-called death pond, created from pockets of minerals over 23 million years ago, and it kills anything that enters it instantly. Fish, shrimp, eels, you name it. If it enters, it never leaves. Scientists have discovered many of these death ponds throughout the Red Sea, and they're filled with brine and salty solutions, but absolutely zero oxygen, which is what makes the area so deadly to sea creatures. Other predators use these pools as hunting grounds, cleaning up the borders of anything that made the mistake of trying to swim through, as they go into shock from the lack of oxygen and immediately die, making for easy pickings for the predators. You know what they say, Work smarter, not harder.
Kicking off our list at number 10, mini brains. Yeah, mini brains with little tiny mini eyes. That's where we'll start today. Yeah, welcome back, I guess. August 2021, a strange but daring group of scientists announced that they had grown a little human brain, equipped with its own set of eyes. Yeah, it's actually not called a mini brain, of course, that's a bit much. Its scientific term is organoid or organoid. I'm not really sure. Organoid sounds like something you'd order at a restaurant. An organoid sounds like an instrument. The entire goal here was for scientists to understand eye disease furthermore, right? These organoids, these organoids come from stem cells, and ideally growing organoids allows researchers to study how organs develop and provide new information into how organs could react early to specific treatments. So they're like little mini tiny what ifs and little signs. Little tiny balls of what ifs, essentially, that have eyes. They're really kind of gross to look at. Little brains with eyes equals science. The more you know. Number 9, daddy short legs. I'm not a fan of the bug or its name, so here we go. Calling a bug daddy or like daddy long legs, that's so weird to me. I've never liked that. Even as a kid, I'm like, that's not right. Now we might have to add daddy short legs to the mix. That's a real thing. A lot of dads in the bush. Let's talk about them. Scientists have recently created a version where daddy long legs' legs are stunted at birth. Therefore, they're daddy shorter legs. By doing this, they were able to study what they looked like millions of years ago. The daddy long legs, right now, it has a unique way of hunting and moving around. But once the legs were shorter, it almost went back to a form of travel that could only be seen 400 million years ago. It started to move differently, which is kind of cool. How far back do we need to go to get rid of the word daddy? That's my next question. Is that 500 million years? Maybe 600? It's a bug named daddy. Why do we do this? Number 8, undead as a dog. Any dog lovers out there? Awesome. Hit that thumbs up and also maybe skip to the next one. I don't know. A team of Russian scientists released a video in which they showed a few dog heads that were being kept alive by an artificial blood circulation system. No, we're not going to show the video. Sickos. But we can certainly talk about the video. I can do that for you. In the video, the scientists use a heart-lung machine and they're able to show the dog's head responding to sound. Now, scientifically, that's wild. That's a feat, no doubt. Awesome. You guys nailed it. But walking into this room by accident, that's gotta be pretty jarring, pun intended. They would wiggle their ears, they would blink their eyes, and sometimes they were even able to lick their mouths. So that's a terrifying thing to imagine, all just one head. In 2005, for some reason, American scientists began to try and recreate this horrifying experiment. So they flushed out all the blood from a dog and replaced it with oxygen and sugar saline, all that horrible stuff. And then 3 hours after this, and then after a blood transfusion and of course an electrical shock, the dog somehow was brought back to life. Yeah, I wish I knew the purpose or like the end game of this experiment, but couldn't tell you. I mostly wish I just never knew it, to be honest with you, and that we never included it, but it's too late. Number 7, robot dog. This one's a lot better, I promise. Nothing like the last one. Imagine meeting a cyborg version of you. Imagine being a dog and you had to meet another cyborg dog. That's gotta be pretty horrifying. Well, that was the pitch back in 2003 when researchers from the University in Budapest and the Sony Computer Science Laboratory in Paris got together. Yeah, a dream team, some would say. The world was never the same. They're like, should we make Spider-Man movies? They're like, yeah, this first right now. And put this robot dog near the real dog's food. So when the real dog ate, it was growling, it was watching this other thing, and then ultimately it took a chomp and threw it across the room. This robot dog. It could be the fact that something was near its food source in general, but still probably uneasy that a robot dog is staring at it like, you know, let's try to eat. Imagine that in the morning, just looking at you. It's like, hey, am I bugging you? You're like, kind of, yes. You can buy Abo, the cyborg dog, for an easy $3,000 right now. Or you can adopt, you know, that's always great and preferred too. Number 6, Stubbins Firth. Okay, this is one of the craziest science projects I have ever heard of. We're getting a little real now. Here we go. A researcher from Pennsylvania back in the late 1700s. Well, first of all, as you can probably guess, methods back then were gross. They were really messy. They didn't know what they were doing. A lot of firsts in the medical science world, including Firth. Firth was a doctor in training at the time, and he decided to prove to the world that yellow fever was not contagious. Yeah, imagine if he had Twitter right now. You know what I mean? Firth would surgically insert vomit, like vomit, from patients with yellow fever. He would insert that liquid of vomit into his body. He would put this stuff in his wounds, all over his face, his eyes, his pores. He was trying to get it in everything. He was purposely going the extra mile, all in the name of medical research. I'm gonna throw up now. This is so gross. Even urine or saliva, anything that was, in your body, just pour it on, that's it. Just like in Uh-Oh, that TV show where the guy dumps the bucket of goop on the person who gets the trivia question wrong. Just like a bucket of that stuff, just poured right on. And to everybody's surprise, he did not get sick afterwards at all. He was pretty proud of that one. He told everybody this scientific breakthrough. We look back now though, and we realize that Firth just sampled late stage patients. So they were further along, much further than the contagious period. So basically he did all this for nothing. He volunteered to dump all over his, yeah. History's gross. Science as well, very gross. Just a lot of gross Firths in the community. Number 5, the monster study. Speech pathologists, miracle workers most of the time, except for 1939. Back in 1939, speech pathologists at the University of Iowa, they were determined to crack the secret behind stuttering. If you find out the key source, then you can kind of trace back to the problem, yada yada. Sure, I get it. But they believed that it all began with young adults and their fear of public speaking. So these researchers decided to intimidate people and try and induce stuttering. Yeah, they got patients who were showing signs of stuttering early and they verbally attacked them. They kept telling them they shouldn't speak unless they're sure they can do so properly. They were yelling at them, making it very intense on purpose. The experiment did not induce stuttering at all, rather it induced extreme anxiety. Yeah, obviously. Hence why it was referred to as the monster study. 3 of these patients later sued Iowa and the university for $925,000. Yeah, you can't be scaring people. Number 4, Francis Crick. As we go on further, we kind of have to have a laugh. The last few have been pretty f***ed up. Back in the early 1900s, Francis Crick, aka the guy who discovered DNA alongside James Watson, 2 brilliant minds, dare I say these life-changing discoveries, well, it was also announced back then that they also believed in directed transpermia, meaning that humans were put on this planet by aliens. Yeah, like extraterrestrial, like aliens. That's what they fully believed in. The DNA guys believe that we're aliens. So you're like, okay, what's right, what's wrong? What do we do here? Some of his methods involved conversations to patients, real patients. He was a doctor. He'd be like, hey, let's talk about DNA. Also, did you know that aliens planted us here? Cool, I'm Francis Crick. No, that's alarming. Don't do that. Number 3, worm diet. Apologies if you're eating right now. I know myself, I like to snack out and watch YouTube videos late at night. This one, maybe not. Maybe skip this one. Hit the thumbs up and skip it. It's really gross. Back in 1878, Giovanni Battista Grassi covered himself with worms, all in the name of science. His trick, well, his method rather, was to ingest worm eggs, which he kept after autopsies. That's horrible. That's the worst thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Weird hobby, even weirder project. Some parasitologists would argue that this project changed the game and, improved their medical knowledge, yada yada, but I still think it's the grossest thing that I've ever heard on this planet, and who would do such a thing? I had to mention it. Science rules, I guess, right? Science rules. Number 2, inner armor. We've all wanted to be a superhero at some point. You're watching the movie halfway through, you're like, you know what? I really do want that. I want that technology just blasted on my chest, sure. Well, DARPA's Inner Armor project was the Pentagon's way of creating super soldiers. Scientists use animals as reference for these new abilities, like literally from a Marvel movie. Right now, they're studying the DNA of the stellar sea lion because it can reduce blood flow away from organs if need be, in order to reduce oxygen demand. So that would be pretty sweet. You can just stay underwater forever, ideally. That's a cool superpower to have, I guess. Dr. Michael Callahan, who is in charge of running this whole operation, he says the goal is to make soldiers kill-proof against disease, chemical weapons, radioactive weapons, harsh weather conditions, everything, you name it. Now, this was back in 2007, and of course, in 2014, Barack Obama announced that the United States is building Iron Man armor. Put these two together, we have Superman, I guess. That's exciting on one hand, but do we think this is a good idea? Like, where is this gonna go? What if somebody decides to be an awful human being wearing all of these, vests of armor? Am I crazy? Comment down below if you think an Iron Man suit of armor would be a good or a terrible idea. I vote terrible. And finally, number 1, go pills. Look out, 5-hour energy. It's game over. Pack your shit. it, you're fired. These guys have you beat. Every time I watch Lord of the Rings, I fall asleep. Look, I can't help it. It's a great film, sure, but it's just so cozy. The music, it tucks me right in. I don't know. But that's not an issue in the real world, is it? No, not at all. Overnight truck drivers staying awake all night, military personnel that needs to be awake all night for operations or for days at a time, that's a bit more important. Definitely. And that's where Go pills were supposed to come in handy. The pill that keeps you up for 40 hours straight. 40 hours, that's insane. The US Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA for short, is currently funding this pill. Would you want this? Would you ever touch this? I wouldn't do this personally. The benefits it would have, they sound great, but again, right now they're not sure if the long-term side effects are worth it. You don't want people hallucinating mid-flight. You know what I mean? That's bad news. But I'd get through a game of Mario Party 50 turns, so.
In our number 10 spot, we have Johann Conrad Dippel. Dippel was a scientist that is known for creating the elixir of life, an elixir that, yes, would keep you living for as long as you would like. It was called Dippel's oil. He tried to trade the elixir for Frankenstein's castle once. Obviously, the owners didn't fall for it. Or at least they didn't believe in its worth. But I bet you're wondering, why was he thought to be so evil? Well, probably because he used to experiment on himself and dead bodies. And he claimed that he even transferred the soul of one body to another, even though no one could ever confirm this as the bodies were, well, deceased. He also claimed to have a way of releasing demons from bodies. Man, I wonder if that's documented anywhere. We can all use an exercise for releasing demons, you know what I mean? In our number 9 spot, we have Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons is known for being a rocket scientist, but also a follower of the occultist Aleister Crowley. He is believed to be someone who was in direct contact with the devil and did experiments, aka spells, on himself. He was the reason for the advancement of liquid fuel and solid fuel rockets. He was unable to continue being a scientist when news of his occult ways became public knowledge. Apparently, he worked with the founder of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard, to summon the god Babylon to Earth. He died in an at-home explosion from an experiment that he was doing. Jack is a tricky one because obviously everyone was so Christian and Catholic back then that they would have thought him to be evil, but I don't know, I really wonder if this is one of those cases where, you know, they were wrong and maybe he was just a nice guy. I don't know. In our number 8 spot, we have the Tuskegee scientists. The scientists that participated in this experiment are legit pure evil. There was a study done called the Tuskegee study where 600 African American males, 399 who were suffering with syphilis and 201 who weren't, and these men were being tricked into thinking that they were being treated for the illness, when really they were dying off, except the ones that didn't have it, of course. They were the success stories, of course. But what was the purpose of this? Well, to study their corpses. They couldn't have thought to just ask them if they could study their bodies once they die. Why did this happen, and even for as long as it did, which was 40 years, from 1932 to 1972. So evil. Reparations were eventually paid to the victims of the study, but nothing could make up for the horrible feeling they must have felt from going through that experience. In our number 7 spot, we have Dr. Sigmund Rascher. This is a scientist that needed to be mentioned because of how evil he was. However, it is unclear as to whether he experimented on himself at all throughout his life. Rascher is considered one of the most evil scientists in the world from World War II. He worked at a camp and apparently experimented on 300 unwilling people in high altitude freezing experiments. Victims were locked in a pressure chamber where the altitude was being continuously adjusted and they would feel as if they were falling out of a plane. He would also place them in freezing environments naked to perform tests. Of course, this led to many deaths. He was asked to do this on monkeys but demanded humans. Clearly a very sick and awful man. In our number 6 spot, we have Shiro Ishii. There is a man that is known as Surgeon General Shiro Ishii, and he was a scientist and medical officer for the Japanese Imperial Army. In fact, he led the biological warfare unit that is known as 731. He's also known for being just plain evil, as he would experiment on Chinese prisoners and regular civilians. He used biological weapons that is said to have caused tens of thousands of deaths, including the bubonic plague, cholera, and anthrax. He would also conduct other evil experiments on his patients, including forced and simulated hypothermia. It is unclear if he experimented on himself, as I'm sure he wouldn't have given himself the bubonic plague, but it is clear that he was very, very evil. In our number 5 spot, we have Max Joseph von Pettenkofer. Max was a scientist that wasn't so much evil as he was seemingly insane, as he did an extremely risky experiment on himself. Apparently in 1892, he wanted to disprove the theory that cholera bacteria alone was the cause of the disease. In the presence of witnesses, Max swallowed some broth with a large dose of cholera bacteria. He apparently also consumed some sodium bicarbonate to neutralize the acids in his stomach after it was suggested that the acid could kill the bacteria. Apparently he suffered only minor symptoms, and what he did experience, he says, wasn't due to the bacteria. To me, he just sounds like he was either a little insane or just so sure of himself that it wasn't a risk at all. And even then, I would say to be that sure of yourself, to take that big of a risk, means you have to be a little insane. In our number 4 spot, we have Klauberg, another man who is known to be one of the most evil scientists in the world. Klauberg was a scientist in World War II that started off experimenting on himself, but then eventually switched to experimenting on a large amount of women in camps. And what was his purpose? Oh, to sterilize them all. He apparently experimented on hundreds, injecting formaldehyde into their stomachs without any painkillers, as well as it is said that he also injected animal sperm into some of the women to see if he could create an animal-human hybrid. Absolutely horrifying. In our number 3 spot, we have Joseph Mengele, another German scientist from World War II that was said to have had evil intentions. He weirdly had an interest in young humans and twins, and a lot of his experimentation was around them. The most disturbing thing about him was his ability to seem so kind and charming and have everyone like him, but then in the next moment he would be the reason a bunch of people were sentenced to death. A true psychopath, and it's the seemingly kind ones that always leave you with shivers. He has a nickname and is known as the Angel of Death. In our number 2 spot, we have Peter Neubauer. In the 60s and 70s, a secret experiment was done, led by a scientist by the name of Peter Neubauer, that separated twins and triplets from each other, and they were adopted as singles. Apparently this experiment was funded by the National Institute of Mental Health, and the purpose of this experiment is still unclear. To separate living humans from their family, all for the sake of science, is truly just evil in my opinion. The experiment was discovered in the 80s after 3 identical brothers accidentally found each other. I can't even imagine what that must have felt like to be them. I suppose this experiment isn't as horrible as some of the other ones we have listed today, but it still is terribly sad to think about all of these people, missing out on growing up with their brothers and sisters. It is unclear whether Peter's decision to lead this was part of his job and therefore through slight force, as it was being funded by a big organization, or whether he pushed for this to be done. In our number 1 spot, we have Vladimir Demikov. So this is, in my personal opinion, one of the most evil scientists, but honestly there's so many evil ones on this list that it's really hard to say who should take first. So I'm giving it to Vladimir Demikov. Vladimir is a Soviet scientist that is known for performing the evil act of beheading many dogs and then re-sewing them onto other dogs' bodies. He did this for 15 years. Why? Oh, because apparently he was bored. Apparently, he was known to experiment on himself, and also he pioneered organ transplants, which is just so hard to digest that he could have been the founder of something that has done so much good for the world, while on the other hand, he committed unthinkable evil acts. Life is so strange.
Number 10, the chimpanzee human, also referred to as humanzees. which is fun to say. Look, here are the facts, people. We were very close to chimpanzees, DNA-wise. Around 98% of our DNA is shared with these hairy fellows. Back in the 1920s, we got closer than ever. A humanzee was not just a fantasy. Soviet biologist Ilya Ivanov inseminated female chimps with human DNA, but it didn't work. Or did it? Things got questionable when a chimp named Oliver hit the scene in the 70s. Yeah, he was walking like a human, which we've never really seen before. He was referred to as the missing link because of his appearance and the way you would act. He was previously a performance animal. He was a show chimp, so not a hybrid, but many viewed these experiments as immoral back in the day. Which is, yeah, I agree. Also, I remember seeing chimps in family movies, I'm pretty sure. Remember those movies growing up where chimpanzees were like snowboarding or playing hockey? Most Extreme Primate, that was it. That's where we're at, chimpanzees doing barrel rolls and hockey stops. My friends, we're already there. I think we're already at the Planet of the Apes terrifying point. We're screwed if one of these experiments works, that's all I'm saying. Number 9, human cow eggs. Okay, we had a few giggles talking about chimps. Time to get into the real scary science. Back in 2008, hybrid research was being done. Human-animal hybrid research, obviously. The whole idea was to find a cure for Parkinson's disease. I like these projects because we're moving forward, at least. We're not just doing it because we're like, let's see if we can bring dinosaurs back. We're trying to find a solution. Otherwise, we don't need to be poking around cows. Nobody needs 3 bowls of cereal before gym class, okay? There's other ways to wake up in the morning. Let's just leave cows alone for like a bit, maybe? Scientists used the nucleus of a cow egg. They took it out and replaced that nucleus with the human and skin cells. And then in a little time, the egg can develop and turn into a blastocyst, aka a cloned embryo. And there we have stem cells for said science. Again, this is a lovely step, but how far do we go here with DNA mixing? How much DNA are we gonna mix before we're like, stop? Things could go south. For example, just like the number 8, kunga. Perhaps the earliest example of human-animal hybrid testing. Scientists recently learned about this donkey hybrid that roamed ancient Mesopotamia. This was a time even before horses arrived, so they had to do something. Large kungas would pull wagons, and smaller ones would help pulling plows and smaller loads. These little guys were the talk of the town. Imagine a hybrid animal before horses. No wonder they were a status symbol back then. 4,000 years ago, they were given as gifts for weddings. Nice, yummy. Oh, I wonder what this one is. It's definitely a kunga. It's gotta be a kunga. After so long, scientists are finally able to figure out what exactly a kunga was a hybrid of. It was a female donkey and a male Syrian wild ass. Yeah, it's crazy what you can still learn from ancient animal bones from thousands of years ago. Science is incredible. It's more amazing how involved this hybrid was in Mesopotamian culture. Do we bring back the kunga? I don't know. Kinda seems like we could use them. Number 7, woolly mammoth. It was announced less than a year ago that a team of scientists and entrepreneurs over at a new biosciences and genetics company called Colossal, they got the funding finally for quite this project. They're planning to bring the woolly mammoth back to life. Yep. Instead of just paying off student loans, they're like, how about we bring a mammoth back? Let's just see if we can do that. That'll solve some problems. The last mammoth alive was around 7,500 years ago. But what if we had these hairy Goliaths back again today? The Siberian tundra thousands of years ago was once full of these guys, but climate change began to slow them down. Also, humans needing food definitely didn't help. These guys provided warmth and, well, obviously look at them. Lots of food, so they died off quite quick. Genetics company Colossal raised over $15 million to try and bring this thing back to life. And they're on the way, they're doing it right now. That's happening as we speak. A mammoth is being born. They're using the CRISPR gene editing tool, which is a fun tool, I guess. Elephants are still kicking around and their genomes, combined with the preserved mammoth DNA, is the magic trick. So if you see mammoths trending on Twitter in 4 to 6 years, well, you know why. There's not another Ice Age movie. It's definitely just a real mammoth. Number 6, Pyrenean ibex. The Pyrenean ibex also went extinct a long time ago. This was much sooner though than mammoths. This was around 2000. The last one was a female named Celia, and a falling tree sadly ended her life. Of all the ways to go, really? Come on, man, that's sad. It was a subspecies of the Spanish ibex. They were native to the Pyrenees Mountains on the border of Spain and France. Back in the medieval ages, their population was reduced drastically to an endangered level because of, knights and swords and bows equals lunch, right? So the numbers dipped. More than fair, there's armies to feed. But in 2009, science was ready for the Pyrenean ibex to return. It was successfully cloned and brought back from extinction for 7 whole minutes. Yeah, 7 minutes in heaven, or 7 minutes out of heaven, rather. DNA from the last living lady was implanted in the womb of a domestic goat. Yeah, a little goat hybrid. Lung complications are why the clone sadly didn't last, but we had a hybrid medieval animal for 7 minutes. We're getting close. Number 5, the super cow. Moo, but with a lot of O's. Introducing the super cow. Okay, start your day off with some super milk, and then have a super stomach ache. your super pants. My God, I can't do milk anymore. Only in Belgium. Back in the 1800s, scientists and farmers brought together native cattle and short horn cattle to make this hybrid animal. After that, they would literally just pick the biggest cows of the bunch and then have them breed together, and then so on and so forth. These cows are officially called Belgian Blues, but I will continue to call them super cows. Thank you very much. That sounds amazing. I can't even look at them. God, they're disturbing. They look like bodybuilders. Just, it makes no sense. How does, what? Where does that come from? Let's move on. Number 4. Tasmanian tiger. Once native to Australia, the Tasmanian tiger, also known as the thylacine, was a massive carnivorous marsupial that went extinct around the 1930s, also quite recently. Major factors here are, as you guessed what I said earlier, climate change, hunting, and its genetic diversity wasn't all too great. All those combined, it's just no chance. It's sad on one hand because these beautiful creatures disappeared so recently, but it's also recent enough that we have a shot at bringing them back to life. Hey, what's up? Hey, you've been asleep. Hi. Hybrid science. There we go. Let's get mixing. Yeah, imagine looking outside and seeing this thing on your front yard. Are we ready for this? I think we're ready. Let's jazz up some trails by introducing these guys. Specimens of the Tasmanian tiger still remain preserved in jars. No idea who has them or why, but we'll move on from that. Thank God for those jars. So we have Tasmanian tiger genes present, so scientists can now insert them into a mouse fetus. They just combine fetus of a mouse and DNA. I do this a lot. This is how I'm gonna explain this to my kids and be like, hey, this is how the human life cycle works. You just do this with your hands a lot, and then you're alive. They're still lacking the full DNA to successfully recreate it, but they're close. A recent $5 million donation to the University of Melbourne earlier this year allowed for researchers to create a research lab. So yep, they're actually getting very close. They're like making the lab to make this thing. I'm like, ooh, they're gonna do it. Number 3, the great razor auk. Yes, once thriving in colonies off North Atlantic coasts, the great auk would grow up to 30 inches long and its wings would only be used to swim. They were cute, but quite defenseless, these little guys. Around the 1500s, European fishermen discovered this perfect area for hunting and or eating, and it just happened to be where most of these great auks were hanging out. So they disappeared fast. By 1950, the last 2 known specimens were hunted by a single fisherman on Eldey Island, just off the coast of Iceland. And that was it. They were gone. Until now. Nice. Scientists plan on using genetic information extracted from their fossils or preserved organs. Remember those guys in jars and the organs that I talked about? Yep. Classic organs in jars. Always coming in handy. They plan on editing their DNA into the closest living species, which is now the razor-billed auk. So now we get a nice fun hybrid again. The organization Revive and Restore is behind the wheel on this one, so keep it up. Keep bringing things back from extinction, just not humans. I don't want zombies, please. Number 2, lions. Back in the 80s in the Chatbir Zoo in India, they started an experimental program where they would breed together domestic lions and African lions in the hopes that they would just be introduced to the wild and help with the dwindling population of wild lions in India. On paper, that's a great idea. That's a step forward. We love those. But the zoo found 2 African lions that were being used in a circus and was like, you know what? We're gonna save you guys. Get out of the circus. Then they brought them in to breed with their 2 Asiatic lions. So I mean, from circus to science, it's like, you're still sorry. When the cubs were born, it was clear this was already a mistake from the get-go. The cubs already had severely weak back legs, they were having trouble walking as they got older, their immune system started to fail, and by 2000 they had bred more than 70 of these hybrid lions. So they finally decided to stop the program and all the males were given vasectomies in order to stop any further reproduction. There are luckily laws that prohibited them from killing these animals, so at this point we're just waiting for them to die naturally, which sucks, but it's definitely better. And finally, number 1, the dodo bird. Dodo birds were once big and beautiful. These flightless ground nesting birds once filled the islands of Mauritius located in the Indian Ocean. They were awesome. We've seen them in Ice Age. They're all funny and big and furry. They had massive talons. They were gray and blue. They were gorgeous, and best part of all, they didn't have any natural predator until, us. Until we came around. Around 1507, the island was discovered by Portuguese sailors, and well, the rest is history and or lunch. They were the easiest bird to hunt, hence the phrase dead as a dodo. They weren't just loved by sailors either. They were not 100% to blame here. Monkeys, rats, pigs, any animal basically that made its way to the island easily had their eggs for lunch, so it didn't take long for the dodo bird population to be completely wiped out. The last dodo was hunted in 1681, but could it be? Could we bring back said dodo birds? Scientists found an extremely well-preserved dodo skeleton back in 2007, so we may have a chance at picking some DNA apart there and bringing them back to life via hybrid science. A research facility near Melbourne, Australia is currently trying to use pigeon genes to bring the bird back. I mean, yeah, I'm all for the idea of bringing an animal back to life. Scientifically, that's definitely a feat in itself, but how long before these things are on hot ones, like dodo chicken wings? Now that I've said it, you kind of want one, right? Now you feel bad. There we go. Hit that thumbs up so we don't feel guilty in the future.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Ed Gein's cauldron. Ed Gein's cauldron is a cast iron pot that was found on the property of the infamous serial killer Ed Gein. Gein was known for his gruesome crimes in the 1950s, and when police searched his property, they discovered not only the remains of his victims, but also various macabre artifacts made from human bones and skin. Among these items was the cauldron, which Gein allegedly used to hold body parts during his gruesome acts. After Gein's arrest, the cauldron was kept as evidence for several years before being returned to his family. However, it is said that the cauldron is cursed and has brought misfortune to anyone who has possessed it. According to legend, a man who bought the cauldron in the 1960s met a very quick and horrible demise shortly afterward, and another owner reportedly suffered from a series of tragic accidents. Today, the cauldron's whereabouts are unknown, and it remains a mysterious and haunting artifact associated with one of America's most notorious criminals. In our number 9 spot today, we have John Murrell's thumb. John Murrell's thumb is a small, shriveled digit that is believed to have belonged to John Murrell, a notorious American criminal who lived during the 19th century. The digit is said to possess a powerful curse and is associated with various tales of hauntings and misfortune. One of the most popular legends surrounding the thumb is that it is cursed to bring bad luck to anyone who possesses it. According to the legend, the thumb was cut off from Murrell's body after his execution and passed down through a series of owners who all experienced misfortune and tragedy. It is said that the thumb would cause accidents, sickness, and even death to those who kept it in their possession. Another tale tells of a man who came into possession of the thumb and began experiencing strange occurrences, such as objects moving on their own and eerie whispers in the night. The man eventually became so terrified that he buried the thumb in a field, but it is said that the haunting continued even afterwards. Despite its ominous reputation, John Murrell's thumb has been sought after by collectors and paranormal enthusiasts over the years. Some even believe that the thumb possesses a sort of supernatural power that can be harnessed for personal gain. However, most people are content to leave the thumb where it belongs and avoid any potential consequences of disturbing its resting place. In our number 8 spot today, we have Old Nick. Old Nick, also known as the Swansea Devil, is a legendary figure that dates back to the 1890s and currently resides in the Swansea Museum. During that time, the prestigious St. Mary's Church, located in the town's center, was undergoing renovations, and when a local builder was turned down for the job, he sought revenge. He purchased a row of cottages adjacent to the church, demolished them, and built large brick offices, topping them with a carving of Old Nick. According to legend, he placed a curse on the church himself, declaring that this devil would remain laughing after its destruction. Years later, during World War II, the town was heavily bombed and St. Mary's, along with most of the town, was destroyed. However, the office building with Old Nick remained undamaged. After the war, Old Nick disappeared, but later resurfaced, prompting a petition to return him to his former spot, and also a counter petition to keep him far away from the rebuilt church. Currently, Old Nick resides behind glass in the Swansea Museum, and it is said that the glass enclosure is for the protection of visitors. In our number 7 spot today, we have Charles Manson's TV. There are many haunting tales surrounding this TV, and honestly, that makes a lot of sense considering its history, as it was the one that was present in the Spawn Ranch where Manson and his followers resided for a period of time. This ranch was a former movie ranch that had fallen into disrepair and was used as a hideout by the Manson family. It was during their time at the ranch that they planned and carried out their atrocious crimes. The TV was present in the living quarters at the ranch and was said to have played a significant role in Manson's ability to manipulate and control his followers. Manson would often use the TV as a tool to brainwash and indoctrinate his followers with apocalyptic visions and very harmful ideologies. The TV was seized as evidence by the police following the arrest of the Manson family members and has since been sold at auction. The exact whereabouts of the TV at this point in time are unknown, but many have said that the TV is cursed by the evil energy that Manson himself held. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Atlantis Ring. The Atlantis Ring is a clay ring discovered in 1860 in an Egyptian high priest's tomb in the Valley of Kings. Howard Carter acquired the ring and kept it until his his death in 1939. The ring is believed to be over 5,000 years old and is decorated with very unique geometric symbols not seen before in Egyptian culture. What makes this story so intriguing is that Carter, who discovered King Tut's tomb, claimed to have worn the ring as a talisman during the tomb's opening, which protected him from the curse. Unlike other members of his team, he did not die a mysterious death afterward. Instead, he attributed his protection to the ring's power. So I guess the ring is kind of like an anti-cursed object due to its association with the protection of Howard Carter. Although replicas are available, none are believed to possess the power of the original Atlantis ring. In our number 5 spot today, we have Bela Lugosi's mirror. Bela Lugosi, the actor who famously portrayed Dracula on screen, owned a mirror that is said to be cursed. According to legend, the mirror was given to Lugosi by a fan who claimed that it was possessed by the spirit of a dead woman. Lugosi allegedly experienced strange occurrences after acquiring the mirror, including seeing the reflection of the woman's face in the glass. He tried to get rid of the mirror, but it reportedly kept returning to him. After his death, the mirror passed through the hands of several owners who also reported strange phenomena associated with it, such as cold spots and apparitions. Some even claimed to have seen Lugosi's face staring back at them from the mirror. Today, the whereabouts of the mirror are unknown, and it remains one of the most mysterious and haunted objects in Hollywood history. In our number 4 spot today, we have Uluru Rock. Uluru Rock is a massive sandstone formation located in the southern part of the Northern Territory in Australia. It is a sacred site for the indigenous people of the area, and it is known as Ayers Rock. Visitors are advised not to take anything from the site as it is considered disrespectful and can bring bad karma. However, some people still choose to smuggle pieces of rock out of the area. This act has reportedly resulted in severe consequences, including bad luck, illness, and even the death of loved ones. The curse associated with these stolen rocks is so strong that it is common for the company that manages the tours of the formation to receive letters of apology with the returned rocks. This phenomenon happens so often that the company expects to receive at least one letter a day. While some may dismiss this as a mere coincidence, the frequency and consistency of these occurrences suggest otherwise. In our number 3 spot today, we have Natalie Wood's yacht. The haunting tales surrounding Natalie Wood's yacht, named the Splendor, have been the subject of speculation and controversy for decades. In November 1981, the actress was on a weekend trip aboard the yacht with her husband Robert Wagner and friend Christopher Walken. The circumstances surrounding her death have remained a mystery, but it is known that Wood drowned in the water near the yacht and her body was found the next morning. The yacht itself has been the subject of strange occurrences and haunting tales ever since. According to reports, strange noises and unexplained occurrences have been observed on board the yacht. Witnesses have reported hearing unexplained voices and footsteps, as well as doors opening and closing on their own. Some have even claimed to have seen the ghostly apparition of Natalie Wood herself, still wearing the same clothing she had on the night of her death. Despite the rumors and tales, there is no concrete evidence to support the idea that the yacht is actually haunted. However, the tragic circumstances surrounding Natalie Wood's death and the mysterious events that have been reported on the yacht have contributed to its reputation as a haunted vessel. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Screaming Skull. The Screaming Skull is housed in Burton Agnes Hall in England and is believed to have belonged to Catherine Ann Griffith. Catherine was the youngest in her family and enjoyed wandering the property, but on one such walk she was attacked and robbed by a group of individuals who left her severely injured. Despite being brought back to the hall, Catherine passed away a few days later. Before her death, she requested that her family remove her head and keep her skull so that they would always have a piece of her with them. Following her burial, the family experienced strange occurrences in the house, including bumps, moans, and screams. It was then said that they decided to fulfill Catherine's request and the strange happenings stopped. However, when a maid found the skull and threw it out of a nearby window, which is a strange thing to do when you find a skull, the strange occurrences began again. Eventually, the family decided to place the skull in a secret spot within the walls of the house so that Anne's spirit could rest in peace. The story serves as a reminder to honor the wishes of those who have passed to avoid any lingering spiritual activity. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Dark Mirror, finishing this list off with another cursed mirror. This one is now a part of the Traveling Museum of the Paranormal and Occult, and that in itself is enough to understand why it is considered to be a cursed object. The museum acquired the mirror from its previous owner, who had bought it from a psychic fair. Despite being created sometime around the 1820s or 1830s, the mirror still boasts a beautiful appearance, but it is believed to hold some dark secrets. The former owner reported that every time they looked into the mirror, they saw disturbing images that left them feeling very unsettled. Since joining the museum's collection, guests have also reported similar experiences, seeing reflections of their own dead bodies and other unsettling apparitions. Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have mass extinction. Paleontologists have been able to identify 5 different points in the history of the Earth where they believe that, for whatever reason, there have been mass extinctions where many, or sometimes even most, species were eliminated. Not only does this make me wonder what the Earth looked like in all of its different stages, but it also makes me question when the next one is going to be. As it turns out, however, we might currently be in the midst of one. In the past, the reasons for these mass extinctions have been things like asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, changes in the atmosphere, but this time it might be something different. According to biologists today, we are in the middle of the 6th mass extinction, and it started with mastodons being some of the earliest victims. From there, as the early humans moved from continent to continent, large animals that had been there and thriving for millions of years began to suddenly disappear. After the mastodons, it was the giant kangaroos in Australia, then the dwarf elephants in Europe, and the list just continues on. What is the common denominator in all of these? Well, humans, of course. Humans are driving this modern extinction with our habits of hunting, destroying habitats, introducing invasive species that throw delicate ecosystems off balance, and of course, spreading disease. This is of course of concern to scientists because who knows what our world will look like on the other end of things. I mean, as if we don't pollute the Earth enough, Elon Musk is now polluting our sky and our orbit, so who knows what's next and who knows when we'll stop. In our number 9 spot today, we have dark energy. Astronomer Edwin Hubble, whom the Hubble telescope is named after, in the 1920s made the discovery that the universe is not static and it is in fact actually expanding. He was studying a supernova when he realized that the universe was not only expanding, but was expanding at a much higher rate now than it was a long time ago. This discovery was groundbreaking because prior to it, scientists believed that the gravity of matter would end up at least slowing the expansion of the universe, if not cause it to contract. Since this switched up everyone's way of thinking so much, there then began to be the debated topic of dark energy. This is the idea that there is an inexplicable force that is pulling the cosmos apart at speeds that are only increasing. Dark energy is said to make up 73% of the universe, but we still haven't been able to pin it down and directly detect it. Basically what I'm saying is we're pretty sure it's there, but we have no idea what it is, so that's a little terrifying. In our number 8 spot today, we have our brains. Our brains aren't really ours, no matter how much we'd like to pretend they are. Perhaps that sounds a little more daunting than it actually is, but what I mean is that a lot of our behaviors, our emotions, and our beliefs are influenced by factors we don't even realize. It's like how everyone is happier when the weather is nice and sunny. Even if it's still cold, re Canada, just a cloud-free day changes a lot. Or like how when doing a taste test, you're more likely to prefer whatever the very first thing you tried is, even if the rest of the samples are exactly the same. Or like how a sneaky salesman simply gently nodding up and down to you while asking a question might make you more inclined to say yes to whatever deal they're offering you. You think you know why you're attracted to someone, but there's a chance it might actually just be their smell. Our memories aren't nearly as good as we think they are, and we often remember things incorrectly, even if we swear it's right. We misinterpret information all of the time based on our biases and our own preconceptions. We make generalizations that aren't right. What I'm trying to say is that what we think is reality is actually just our own reality that we've created in some ways. Perhaps this is just a biological mystery, but perhaps this means something larger. I mean, while this is a part of what makes life and makes interpersonal relationships interesting, there could be some more serious implications about this. Whether it's a judge or jury, a doctor's misdiagnosis, or about 100 other things that I could think of, this is something that could be and likely is quite problematic, especially since it's something we don't discuss very often. In our number 7 spot today, we have age. How old can humans possibly age? It's an age-old question. literally. Over the decades, the average human lifespan has risen, and it's seen an exponential rise in the last few centuries. For example, the global life expectancy at birth average for the 19th century was between 28.5 years to 32 years old. That would mean in the 1800s, I'd have less than 10 years left. I'm basically a grandmother at this point. In our day and age, I have to listen to people way older than me tell me how little I know and how young and dumb I am. Here's where this leads to an interesting question. What is the oldest age a human can possibly reach? Is there a person who is alive right now who's going to be the first person to reach 150? Could people realistically live into their second century? And if so, what are the medical implications of this? Like, if someone lived into their 60s in the 1800s, that would have likely been a way older looking and feeling 60 than what 60 years old is to us now, right? The technology in medicine to make this happen and extend the human lifespan is probably already in development, but if it becomes a possibility, this leaves a lot of unsettling questions to be answered, and those are the things scientists are already looking ahead at. In our number 6 spot today, we have dark matter. Okay, if dark energy and all the mysteries it holds weren't enough, now we've got dark matter to talk about, and I'm sorry, but there's no more answers with this one. In the 1960s and the 1970s, scientists began to hypothesize that there might be more mass in the universe than we can see. After this, an astronomer at the Carnegie Institute of Washington named Vera Rubin was studying the speed of stars at different locations within galaxies. What she found was that there was essentially no difference in the velocity of the stars, whether they were closer to the center of the galaxy or further out. This was an interesting discovery because that defied the most basic laws of physics, right? Like, applying what we knew at that point, it would have made more sense for the stars on the outskirts of the galaxy to orbit more slowly than those at the center. In order to explain this, astronomers began discussing the phenomena of dark matter. It can't be seen, but it has a mass, which is how it's able to be detective, because it exerts some sort of gravitational pull on regular matter. Dark matter makes up 23% of the universe, and if you remember from before, dark energy accounts for 73%, so that leaves us with a whopping 4% of matter that we understand better and know more about, which is matter like humans, planets, stars, that sort of thing. The other 96% of what the universe is made of is one of space's greatest mysteries, and that's a kind of terrifying thought, right? We have no idea what everything else is made up of. That's insane. In our number 5 spot today, we have Alzheimer's research. Many of us are familiar with Alzheimer's, but if you don't know, it's a neurodegenerative disease that causes dementia, and despite decades of research, there currently isn't a treatment for it that has been found to be highly effective. For a long time, there was a theory that suggested that Alzheimer's was actually caused by a pileup of protein called amyloids, which then creates a plaque in the brain, but because of the fact that treatments that are used to help clear the amyloids don't seem to work very well in terms of combating the disease, it is thought that now this might have been an incorrect theory. Researchers now think that their attention is better focused on other potential causes like viral infections. Now people think and are concerned that all of the research of Alzheimer's might have been focused too much on that one theory, which has set the research back and cost them valuable time. This might be true, and hopefully one day when we do learn about how to effectively combat the disease, we'll understand just how much of a waste it really was or wasn't, but I also think that when it comes to medical research, is any of it really waste? I mean, knowing what is not causing it is definitely a step in the direction of finding out what is causing it. In our number 4 spot today, we have bacteria resistance. There are an array of antibiotics and vaccines that have been created that have not only helped us survive as a human race, but have also improved our quality and length of life. This is all amazing and truly helpful, but the scientists who study things like this also made a scary discovery that while these treatments are doing great work, there are some microbes who are working just as hard, and they might be evolving faster than we can fight them. This is why the flu shot is created yearly, as the previous shot is ineffective against the next year's bug, or why hospitals are seeing some people have a simple cut turn into a potentially limb or even life-threatening situation because of antibiotic-resistant staph bacteria, or how there are illnesses jumping from animals to humans, or even how tuberculosis is seemingly making a comeback. These kinds of discoveries are extremely important because it helps us calculate next steps, but it's also incredibly frightening because while we might still be ahead for now, how long is that gonna last? There's a chance that the bacteria is going to catch up to us and we won't be able to get back ahead of it. And remember how we were talking about how low the average lifespan was not that long ago? Yeah, well, we can thank antibiotics in part for helping us expand that, and you can infer what would happen if the bacteria overcame our medical advancements. We'd all die. That's what I'm saying. In our number 3 spot today, we have ball lightning. Okay, I'd never heard of this before, and now I am simply dying to see it, but truthfully, I probably never will. For the last millennia, apparently there are some people who are telling stories about these mysterious balls of light that glow and crackle and basically hover there creepily during thunderstorms. Yeah, I want to see a glowing orb. I am so jealous. These glowing balls have been seen by people in their homes, on airplanes, apparently some have even seen them passing through windows. While my first thought is of course aliens, I mean a thunderstorm seems like a perfect time for them to visit, scientists think that these ball lightning are actually more terrestrial than I'm thinking. But despite that, they are the most mysterious weather phenomena on the planet. Ball lightning usually only appears for a few seconds, but here's the thing. It's impossible to predict when and where it will show up. You don't choose ball lightning chooses you. It's quite rare, but people and scientists alike have experienced it. It's been attempted to be created in labs, but no one can figure out the exact formula that creates it, so I'm gonna continue on with my original theory of aliens. In our number 2 spot today, we have, how will the universe end? Perhaps it's a morbid question, but it's a good one. I mean, all good things must come to an end, and that might include the universe itself, but maybe it doesn't? I mean, we don't know. There are theories such as the Big Crunch, which suggests that the expansion of the universe, which has been ongoing since the Big Bang, will eventually slow to a stop, and then the universe will give way to the force of gravity, essentially just pulling everything. Planets, galaxies, all of it into a single dense point until everything is just wiped out. There are other theories out there such as the Big Freeze, the Big Bounce, or the Big Rip, which sounds the most terrifying of them all, although I'm not particularly interested in any of these options so far. The good news is that this is all billions and billions of years away, so we won't be around to find out regardless. But when it does happen, it'll be a pretty spectacular event. Or maybe by that time the human lifespan will be so long that we will be around to check it out. Wouldn't that be a spectacular event? I don't think I'd want to live for billions of years though. In our number 1 spot today, we have slime mold. No, we are not talking about looking up slime tutorials on YouTube, we are talking about the strangely intelligent slime mold, more particularly asking, how is that stuff so smart? Basically, they are single-celled organisms, but they, and by they I mean many individual slime mold cells, can all fuse themselves together into one big mass that's capable of thinking? I put a question mark on that because I'm not sure if that's the right word, but I don't know what else you could call it. These masses can solve mazes, they can make risk versus reward decisions, and there's some evidence that suggests that slime mold just might be able to keep track of time. I have absolutely zero idea what tests could reveal that mold has some sort of internal clock, but it's said to exist. The reason this is so intriguing and captivating to scientists is because all of this is happening with no brain present. Not even a single brain cell. I'm glad to know I'm not the only one. However the slime mold is able to do this, it means that it has evolved in a way that is completely different from humans, which is a bewitching idea that leaves us both fascinated and kind of confused. How do they do this? What can this teach us about intelligence? And honestly, how does this even happen if there's no brain? What is responsible for the ability to make these kinds of decisions?
Starting off this countdown, we have the sarcophagus. Basically, this is a massive steel and concrete structure that covers the Chernobyl power plant. It was designed to help contain the radiation. The construction of the structure lasted for 206 days, and those working on it had to work in shifts of no more than 7 minutes. Any more time spent near the reactors would have killed them. But still, they did sacrifice their lives building this because thousands of workers still died from exposure to the radiation. Those that survived got severely ill, and majority of them developed cancer. Nowadays, the sarcophagus is still there, but it's beginning to crumble. In 2019, they were in the process of dismantling it because it was going to collapse. So a new one is currently being installed. That's probably the scariest thing in Chernobyl because of how deadly the building it's containing is. Coming in at number 9, we have the gas masks. And if you guys are liking this video or want to see part 3, then smash that like button. Chernobyl already looks like the place where an apocalypse occurred. Buildings are completely abandoned, run down, and overgrown with nature. What doesn't help is the piles upon piles of gas masks scattered all throughout Chernobyl. This really adds to the eeriness of this place. And again, makes it look like a place where a zombie or alien takeover occurred. In fact, there is one room inside a school which is just completely filled with child-sized gas masks. It's very creepy, but also sad. Like, imagine how frightened the young children were when this happened. The gas masks found there are just a sad reminder of the horrors that took place there when the reactor exploded. Moving on to number 8, we have the rotting toys. Littered all throughout the city are toys or personal belongings people had to leave behind. The saddest thing to see are pictures of children's toys left behind. Like, I just think that was probably someone's favorite little dolly. Go anywhere there and you'll find items scattered everywhere, now broken and covered in filth. Like, imagine you're rushed out of your home and have to leave behind all your personal belongings. That must have been so hard. I can't imagine how everyone must have felt. It's really depressing to think about. Moving on at number 7, we have the examination chair. So this one is pretty strange, but somehow a gynecologist's examination chair ended up in the middle of the woods outside of a hospital. Not only is that super weird, but it's also super creepy. It's all rusted and beat up and looks like an old torture device. Not only that, but that means someone had to go inside the abandoned hospital, find that chair, and then carry it all the way back down and into the woods. I got a lot of questions. Why would someone do this? And how long did it take them to do this? And again, why would someone do this? Either way, it makes for a very spooky encounter. Moving on at number 6, we have the abandoned cooling tower. A partially constructed cooling tower can be found at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. They were built to evaporate the cooling water from the 2 new reactors. Sadly, they were never completed. Now, these things are massive. The diameter was over 120 meters and it stands at 150 meters tall. Obviously, after the accident, there was no need to continue on with the construction of this, so the government just left the towers there along with everything else. Eventually, over time, nature will have its way with it and it will start to erode and crumble. It's just crazy seeing all these abandoned infrastructures. Imagine how life would have been if that explosion never happened. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the toxic river. There's a river that's just filled with radioactive water right near the reactor. The scariest part is, despite how toxic the water is, a bunch of aquatic life live there. In particular, giant catfish. Yes, giant catfish. A video from 2016 shows a massive catfish swimming in the water. People originally were like, oh my god, what the heck is that? It must be some sort of mutated animal. Later, it was just found out to be a giant catfish. But still, what the heck? And it's the fact that they have adapted to be able to survive in that highly toxic water. Like, that just baffles me. Not only that, but they can thrive there because the water has no higher predators. Obviously though, you're not allowed to go fishing there. Okay, I feel like that's a given, but I also feel like people would still try it, so I'm just gonna say it. Don't go fishing there. In our 4th spot, we have the jarfish. Speaking of fish, we're gonna go with this. So back in 2016, photographer and journalist Miriam Wazer took a trip to explore the ruins of Chernobyl. While inside an abandoned building, she came across something very creepy and odd. She found a bunch of fish and other specimens in jars. Why someone was collecting fish, it just baffles many. And they weren't even like proper beakers or science mason jars. No, it looked like someone emptied out their jar of pickles and then used it to store the specimen. I think it's best if those remain untouched. Like, can you imagine how stinky they would be if they were open nowadays? They would reek. Old stinky fish is not something I would ever want to handle. Now, the other specimen beside the fish are unknown. No one knows what the heck they are. But if you know, let me know in the comments below. Coming in at number 3, we have the abandoned hospitals. The hospitals at Chernobyl are quite eerie. They're just filled with rusted, empty hospital beds, littered syringes, and more. The walls and floors are cracking, and there's dirt and questionable red marks on the floor. I think the saddest thing though is that these hospitals are often trashed with medical supplies just tossed everywhere. The days after the explosion happened, people were frantically rushing to hospitals. Hospital staff were overwhelmed by the amount of people there. This moment is still preserved in the hospitals to this day. It's pretty dark once you think about it. And at number 2 today we have the Sad Alley. The Sad Alley, or the Alley of Memory, is an alley in the Ukraine created in memory of the villages and residents who had to flee from their homes during the disaster. Basically, it's a walkway with signs lining the sides. These signs are names of cities and villages that had to evacuate and leave everything behind. It's a way to ensure we just never forget the impact that this disaster had. It's really sad. And in our number 1 spot today we have the radioactive spiders. Yes, you heard me correctly. Imagine if Peter Parker got bit by one of these bad guys. He'd be like a weirdly mutated Spider-Man or something like that. But anyways, the spiders in the exclusion zone are radioactive. So you definitely don't want to be bit by one. Oh wait, it gets worse. They also make radioactive webs. Yeah, you heard me, that's a thing. So you don't have to just worry about these spiders, but you have to worry about walking through their deadly webs. Like, what the heck? No thank you. Nuh-uh. I'm not a fan of spiders, but imagine radioactive ones. That sounds like it belongs in a horror movie. Radioactive, radioactive.